You are now listening to Protecting Your Nest with board-certified family medicine and obesity medicine specialist Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com. Welcome to the Protecting Your Nest podcast. Following the overwhelming success of season 1 and 2 of Reverse Carnivore, Charles Mattocks and his producers have decided to create another version of the Reverse series. This time, Charles will introduce a broader audience to the carnivore dietary pattern. During this new version of Reverse, his guests will learn about carnivore, intermittent fasting, while being pushed along to make the necessary changes to improve their quality of life. Today, I wanted to introduce you to two guests of the series, the Carnivore series, a couple who were able to join the house mentors and experts on their journey to achieve metabolic health as well. Today's guests are Susan Harris and Tim Kasprick. Susan is a television host, author, and former teacher who is passionate about helping others turn around type 3 diabetes. And if you follow me, you know you can reverse that. Susan is also joined by her husband, Tim Kasprick, and Tim is a Saskatchewan meat producer. Yeah, I got it. So in Canada. And they both live in Canada. They love their cats. And today they're going to share their story of healing. And I think it's also a great way for you to preview the Reverse Carnivore series, because if you like these guys, you're going to like the series. And with that, guys, I welcome you to the Protecting Your Nest podcast.
Thanks, Dr. Hampton.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. I love couples. I recently had the two crazy ketos on my podcast, right? And I guess you're two crazy carnivores, because you guys are a wonderful couple out here spreading the healing message, as me and my wife are doing as well. And I really appreciate that. I know I'll preview that we did a video short where we talked a little bit about your book that talks about journaling. And I think I have that book with me. Here it is. It's the Sweet Life Diabetes Journal. I'm showing it for two reasons. One is because I want to make sure people check out that video on YouTube when it's released, but also this importance of collecting data. And I'm so impressed by that concept that me and my wife, her name is Karan, we did an animated video short. And in that video short, we talked about continuous glucose monitors. So I just think people need data. And I know you use a continuous glucose monitor, Susan. So I really think that's really important. But let's start off by just talking a little bit about how this love affair began. How did you guys meet and become this power carnivore couple?
So luckily, Susan and I both were living in the same area, working for the same organization. Lots of wonderful things happened in Saskatchewan, and that's how we met.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you met. And I know me and my wife, we met in college, and lots of wonderful things happened at Xavier University as well. So we're very happy that we connected, and now we have two sons and a life together. So it's all good. So now before you guys started your journey towards this whole lifestyle journey, most people have something going on with their body. Maybe they're having symptoms, something's wrong with their health. So when you go backwards a little bit, before you guys both made lifestyle changes, maybe each of you can share what life was like before you started making lifestyle changes.
Yes, for me, I look back now and life looked normal back then. But now that I know what normal life is with a normal blood sugar, I can see how what I considered normal was very far from a healthy, whole lifestyle. As I had mentioned in one of my previous conversations, I was overreactive and I hadn't recognized what was driving that. I was highly fearful. I was particularly fearful of driving other people's cars, even Tim's car. I still don't drive it. I didn't feel safe unless I was in my own car, which was well equipped with studded tires because we have got snow 7 out of 12 months here. And I knew my car. It's heavy, it's safe. It's been with me for years. I felt I was clawing for safety. I wasn't happy being at home alone. I felt fearful each time Tim went out. I wondered if he would come back home. I wondered what would happen to me. I had this dread that something was going to happen, even though I was a person of faith. I didn't know why this was so, but now I could see it was blood sugar clouding my brain and rational thinking. And I was constantly afraid to be alone, to drive in the dark, my vision was blurry. We changed glasses. I went to the optometrist and, vision was fine. The numbers they gave were fine. And yet I would not be able to watch the TV. It would become blurry. And then it would clear up and then it would be blurry again. And so we had this on and off pattern. Then I had this lots of itching on my skin. So I was taking antihistamines. I hadn't known about oxalates. Now I know it, both histamine and oxalate, when you eat foods with those things or you are around plants, which was primarily a lot of what were giving me histamines as well as the pet dander, those things are a lethal combination. And so I was finding my skin was really itchy. I was taking a lot of Benadryl. I was using topicals and just thinking, it's just the atmosphere. I wasn't relating it primarily to my food intake. What else was I doing? He was a good witness. So what were some of my other symptoms?
Well, the other thing is when you're wondering what type of tests the doctor is going to have to do on you for perhaps a cancer diagnosis, if you're feeling that bad.
I was constipated. And I remember this was during COVID time. And, I ended up making an appointment. I tried to put it off as much as possible because I kind of didn't want to talk about constipation with my doctor. So I put it off until I couldn't. And I remember when I did get an appointment, I was like, oh my goodness, I have to watch him face to face and talk about constipation. And unfortunately with COVID, we had a telephone conversation. So anyway, he did bring up the fact that, he's going to screen me for a lot of things, including colon cancer. And I remember there was almost a month, 3 weeks to a month, before I got my results or went for my test. And I decided I was going to pray and pray and pray. And I was like, Lord, anything else but colon cancer. And so when on September 29th, 2021, when the office phoned me and asked if we could come in, we went. It was an afternoon visit, and we went right away. And he said that I had diabetes. I didn't have colon cancer. The diabetes part didn't even seem to register as much. I was just so happy that there was no cancer.
Right.
And then he started to describe the diabetes and it being chronic and part of it being genetic. And, my roots are from South Asia, India. And we talked a lot. And then I was in this big fog. But those were primarily some of my symptoms. I was constantly hungry. I would drink an adequate amount of water. I didn't think I was primarily or necessarily eating bad or eating undue sweets or anything. So, and I was a fairly active person. Of course, with COVID, I didn't have as much fresh fruits and vegetables. I did turn towards some more boxed foods and, the stock up kind of things. So I don't know if perhaps that accelerated it during that time, but certainly it was just a year pre-COVID into COVID and then into the diagnosis.
Excellent. Did you have any issues yourself, Tim, as you kind of watch your wife suffer through these things she was going through as well?
Oh, yes. I'd never saw remotely that sick before. Like, this was like almost turning the off switch on somebody, to see her spend so much time lying down in pain. It was very strange because her normal self is very active, very busy, happy, feeling good. And it just dropped off a cliff.
So it sounds like back then you were kind of losing your wife a little bit because she wasn't who you had married. And I, thinking about some of the stuff you commented on, Susan, like plants have oxalates, and that may then lead to histamine. I mean, who knew, right? And who knew, right? So there's a lot of, that's why, but again, what I'm hearing, there's levels to that. There are people who will hear this episode and they tolerate plants better than others. And for those people, have at it. But for myself, for you, it causes problems. And it's literally, this just happened yesterday or this morning. My wife said, I heard your stomach, making some noise, and all I ate yesterday that was beyond my norm was I had some ribs without barbecue sauce, chicken without sauce and stuff. But that's what I normally eat. Decided to eat a little bit of a vegetable, just a little bit, right? And my stomach, although I tolerated it, was still kind of letting me know that's not exactly my favorite thing. So use caution. so I my body talks to me and lets me know, and I ask anybody to do the same, which is again why we made the video short about journaling, so you can identify those moments when something's different, you're doing something different, and then you can react to that by either avoiding that thing or making a different behavior change. So now one of the behavior changes that you made and your husband made was you moved towards this low carb carnivore dietary pattern. So I'm curious, how did you discover that, and what led to you making that change?
Well, I host two local shows. I'm a paid television host, or was at least, and I also do volunteer work with the Access Network locally in Saskatchewan here. So for one of those shows, which is called Hello Happiness, I wanted to do a low carb cooking section because I was eating low carb when I was being treated, when I was treating myself for diabetes. I hadn't even known of the carnivore diet back then. So I was just low carb, no sugar, off the pastas and stuff like that, and just counting how many grams of different nutrients were contained in each, what my portion sizes. So I wanted to translate this knowledge into a television show for my viewers. And I didn't want to copy anything that there was on the internet. So I was just typing in phrases, unique ones that I thought I would use for my show. which would be like something like diabetes cooking, but something fancier I wanted. And when I typed in diabetes cooking, what came up was the Reverse TV series. And I had been researching since 2021 on diabetes, and it never came up. But yet this came up in October of 2022 last year. And it caught my attention, and I watched the little clip, and I saw Charles Mattocks, producer, and the phone number. And I realized that I was so passionate about diabetes. And here was somebody else who was taking the same message that I am passionate to take to the world. Here they are doing it. Could I synergize? Could I be a part of something much bigger than myself? And I connected with the producer, Charles, and, I did my pitch, and he's just such a fabulous, humble, visionary individual, just wanting to get that message that we can use lifestyle and food to turn around reverse diabetes. And that's how I got in touch with Reverse Carnivore.
Yeah, that's cool. I agree. Thank God for Charles, right? We need people.
Yes.
Yeah. Beyond Twitter, beyond YouTube, beyond social media. How do we get this message to those who need it? Again, everybody doesn't need to be carnivore, but there are people who just do better when they minimize plants. And for those people, and I say loudly to all those who are not in the carnivore space, that's okay. Just honor those who need it. Like, there are people out there who may have more than just a stomach grumble at night.
Yeah.
Like I had last night. There are people out there that literally will get sick if they eat plants beyond a certain point, or just in general. So for those people, thank God there's a way to heal. So I really appreciate you guys and all the work Charles is doing. It does take courage, though, to not only be out here sharing this message, but you had an A1C that was pretty high. It takes courage for a patient or a doctor to avoid or turn down medications in that setting. So what gave you the courage to say, I don't want to go down the medication path? And I'm not sure that's right for everybody, but what allowed you to have that kind of courage?
I think it was my faith. Although at the moment I sat with the doctor and Tim, I didn't know faith was acting. I just felt that he said it was my doctor, a most wonderful doctor I have. So I think we have that easy rapport. He knows my history. He knows my educational background and everything. He knows I'm a responsible individual. And I think that doctors can know when they can say, okay, if you want 3 months, I'll give you 3 months. But he slapped on a freestyle libre on me. Mm-hmm. He said, you've got to use something. If you're not going to use the medication, I want you to track this. I want you to buy more. And that we take your A1C level in 3 months and see where you are. And so because he equipped me with those alternate measures, and I knew that if I didn't see the progress that we were looking for, then I would have to go on medication. And so I was very adamant. I've got that grit in my spirit. In spite of my 101 pounds, I have that determination to go after something, to make the sacrifice. And that kicked in for me. And that must have been my faith, knowing that I know God. And God can do what he says he can do in his word. and I am going to do what is practically required. And then I am going to use the God part, because the spirit and the body of people, we're connected. We are not disconnected.
Mhm.
So your mind, your spirit, your body, they all have to function in conjunction, in collaboration with each other. And I was determined that I was going to take this tripartite approach to my health. And I was very diligent with working out my blood sugars and looking at the patterns. And when I had a good result the first 3 months after, we knew that I can keep on the system with the glucose monitor, and I don't need medication. And 7 months after, when I was no longer in that 6.4 and higher, which is the official diabetes numbers, we knew then that I can continue this, and I have continued and maintained it. And now that we're on the carnivore diet, or rather, I'm on the carnivore diet, taking these measures, I'm very interested to see when my body weans out all the fast foods and it's more clean towards carnivore, to see how much faster all of my numbers would go. But my numbers have been like in the threes, and it's just been fantastic. So if you can see here, 4.1 and 3.2, and I scroll down, and there you can see the 3.8. Tim, you can read those.
3.8, 3.6.
And I scan up sometimes every 2 hours.
Mhm.
So I knew that I was doing the right thing. I wasn't skewing the data. I wasn't waiting for a good moment to do it, to take a scan. I would take a scan when I knew that I was going to eat, and after I was going to eat. And it was interesting when I set my alarm and the kitten comes out and we're getting excited over the kitten, then the alarm would beep, because again, so it's just been a very interesting journey to do that. But the root of it would be there is something in the human spirit and the human will that if we call it up, if we have a support system, because I couldn't have done this alone. I had a wonderful doctor, I had a wonderful husband, and they were the two key players in this journey. I had a dietitian as well, but I kind of just went with the foods that I was comfortable eating with based on my sugar numbers. And if you have that, you can do it. People need support and encouragement. And if they don't have that kind of support and encouragement, to tell them, look, you may slip up today, but be kind to yourself. Start again tomorrow. It's okay if you ate too much carbs today, cut it in half tomorrow. Or don't just look for a one-day solution. Let's look for the next 2 weeks and see what you can do. So I really want to encourage people like that. I'm very invested in people. One of my other shows is called Eternity, and that's where I lead people to Christ. I've been a teacher. I've worked a lot in human resources. People have always been the key component of the jobs that I have held, because I love people. I love children. I went into teaching because of that. I love people. I volunteer a show week after week on my own expenses, doing that for people. And I reach out to many people on social media in the neighborhood to help them walk through their journey with diabetes.
That's excellent. Now, when you showed your meter, that didn't sound like a glucose number. What units of measurement is your meter using?
Millimoles per liter.
Got you. So I just wanted to say that out loud, because people may hear those numbers and they're listening for glucose numbers that are in the United States would be different. Yeah, so I want to make sure I said that out loud so people can
Yes,
understand. Yeah.
that's excellent. And yes, in the book here, we have the comparison chart, the glucose references for Canada and the glucose references for the United States. So for Canada, normal is considered 5.9 and lower for the A1C, and for the fast and for the USA, the A1C is 5.7 and lower.
And were the measurements you sharing with those A1C numbers that you were sharing earlier on your meter?
Yeah.
Okay, got you.
Yeah,
So
they were A1C numbers.
got you. So most in the United States, most people would use a meter that would only show their glucose. So I just wanted to clarify that so people won't get confused about that. So that's excellent. Tim, when your wife had the courage, thank you, when she had the courage to try lifestyle, did that make you nervous? Did you know enough about diabetes that you were like, oh my God, you need to take medicine, dear? How did you respond to that?
I learned lots about type 2 diabetes. I thought I knew lots before, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Like even the symptoms she was having, I wouldn't have guessed that was type 2 diabetes. No, there was lots of, I didn't know how devastating type 2 diabetes could be so fast. I thought you had to be sick a really, really long time and do lots of, oh no, it hit you hard and fast. However, I mean, diabetes is a big problem in Canada, like so many other places. We've heard lots about it. Mm-hmm. And I've heard of people really trying to give diet and lifestyle a try. And I actually thought she could do it. Mm-hmm. I wasn't thinking she needed to take I wasn't stopping her and saying, oh, no, let's get you some prescriptions and medications. And no, I'll say I instantly thought she could do it, and she did.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And if I were talking to a clinician, a doctor, or advanced practice nurse, etc., I would say to them, give your patients some grace. Come up with a strategy that meets people where they are. So if a person says to you, no, I'm not going to do that, don't throw them out of your practice. Instead, say, let's mitigate this. Let's come up with a strategy. And in your case, it was a continuous glucose monitor. So we can keep you safe.
Yes.
And there's a way to keep you safe, rather it's calling every day, having a continuous glucose monitor, adding other team members. In my health system with Advocate Health, we have many of our clinics have pharmacists who can help monitor, meet people where they are. And the other concept that I think is important for everybody to understand is that you have medicines which will absolutely help reduce those numbers, but it's more logical to reduce the exposure to what raises your blood sugar. So let's get it on the front end, not the back end. So again, rather people start their journey with bridge therapy, which is medicine, and then they wean off with type 2 diabetes and don't need it anymore. Or if they take the path you took, I just think it's important that our clinicians work with the people in front of them. Now, another thing that could be a challenge is our culture, our ethnicity, the things that we love to eat. And I actually get a kick out of being in clinic, and I'll mention certain things, certain types of foods, and they'll look at me like, there's no way I'm not eating that, doc. That's who I am, that's what we ate. So when you think about your background, your culture, your ethnicity, are there certain foods that you decided to give up that I'm not, not that you would miss it, but that you kind of wish it wasn't on the list of foods that would cause harm? Anything that comes to mind?
Yes, I was born and raised in Trinidad in the West Indies, but my foreparents are from India in South Asia. And so we have roti. It's made from flour, lots of oil. It's got peas in it. It's got a number of variations. It's my absolutely favorite food, but it's absolutely the one that can send my blood sugar spiking. And I did eat it intermittently last year. So for Thanksgiving or for my birthday, I would buy it and I would eat a portion. And I said, if I wanted to eat this roti, I'm going to have to walk an hour after. Mm-hmm. So I rewarded myself with it on occasion and made sure that I did the walking. A friend had bought some cheesecake for my birthday when we were out at a restaurant, and that was last year before going on carnivore, and we ate it. And then I made sure that I did not eat anything for a longer period of time. I did my walking. And so I manage it. I trade off what I can do and what I cannot do. So I was still having it until last year. And after October, I've not had it at all. Mm-hmm. And since I've come on carnivore, and when I begin to see the results, and when I started to understand how food was affecting my body, I came home from the reverse taping sessions and the mentoring that we received. I researched every single thing that was taught to us. I understood for my own self how this is affecting me. And that is what has made it easier to give it up. I see bread around. I don't see roti. I see breads, but I don't eat it. I can easily buy a burger and pick off what I need from it and toss out the bread and the ketchup and the fries. We've traveled recently, and that's what we did. I took pictures with, my fries and burger, but I didn't eat those. I just picked out what I needed from it. So it's been that kind of awareness. And I think if I didn't have the glucose monitor on my arm constantly telling me how this was reacting, it would have been easy to forget it. And so I'm a huge proponent of wearing that, because that really helped me track, that kept me accountable. Mm-hmm. Because if I see that I have eaten something and I'm too excited and a number is, say 6, then I'm not going to go and eat something until my numbers get down to 5. Even if that means I go and take a walk, I breathe deeply, I do some praying, because by now I know myself and I know how to calm my spirit back. I know how to rechannel my thoughts to things that are pleasant and good and lovely. And then I would check in another half hour and it would be 5.2 and I can eat something there. So I set those parameters for myself, and I did miss the food I grew up with. But since I've been on carnivore, maybe there is a greater commitment. Maybe it is that enough time has passed. Gradually, I'm going on 2 years now since I was diagnosed. The longer I stay away from them, the easier it becomes.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent. I love this. Me and my wife, we are starting to walk more outside because the weather is starting to change. And man, sometimes these walks can really lower your blood sugar. I mean, you got to be really careful, right? So having the data, and when we made our animated video, the video talked about how important it was to track data and it makes you accountable. It makes you pause and think about every decision you're going to make, because you're being monitored, right? So I think it's just, that's what it does. So it makes you pause and hesitate. And what I find with patients is that when they have a continuous glucose monitor, they just pause and they're thoughtful and they're reflective. And I just think that's so important. So thank you for that. And but these lifestyle changes beyond carnivore, you know, how we sleep, reducing stress, how we, you know, move our body, all of these things can be a challenge. Did you guys find any of those lifestyle changes very difficult to implement, or did it all kind of just flow and occur fairly easily?
So for me, the biggest thing was what I ate. I'll say I'm kind of an old-fashioned farmer. I kind of do a decathlon every day with what I do. So always lots of exercise. But if this was the thought that went through my head when Susan got her diagnosis, I thought, how wasn't that me? Because if you would compare how the two of us ate, you would think I was the one who should have got the diagnosis because, for example, breakfast had to include dessert for me. One piece of pie if I'm going to be busy, maybe two, and my best friend donuts. That was, I don't think ever in my life I turned down a donut at any situation at all. So cakes, donuts, pies, all that. So for me to now abstain from those things, because over the years, you know, I had friends who were dieting or something. And I'll be honest, I just thought myself, I'm sure glad I don't have to do that. And I can eat whatever I want, whenever I want, because, well, I'm kind of thin. So no problem. That's not true. And I've gotten so much benefits from abstaining from the things I used to, and not just occasionally, but I really don't know how many times, just constantly. Just constantly. So it took some adjustment, but since I'm getting such reward for it, and the carnivore diet fills me up more, I don't have that endless hunger. Like I would just be hungry like a wolf all the time, and I just thought that was normal. Well, the empty carbs were doing that to me, I believe. So being able to change from that, I must have a dessert with every meal, I must have a sugary snack every hour or two. It was a big change, but I'm glad I did it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would make the decision to leave the table. Now, Tim comes home late, so I would sit with him while he eats. But I found that after my diagnosis, I would be grieving for what he was eating. And so I had to make the decision that I'm going to sit in the living room and we'll just talk loudly. Or sometimes I would just go in the bedroom because the smells would be too much, because we didn't necessarily ban any food except pork products, to which I've always been allergic. So it back to your question about whether it was difficult. There were some days I didn't want to get up and walk, but I told myself, well, if you're not walking, you're not going to eat, because I knew there was a correlation. So there were a couple of days where I said, okay, I'm just going to drink some coffee today. And then for the next meal, when I eat, then I'll do the walking. And there was one day in November 2021, a storm was approaching. And I knew it might probably be the last day that I could actually be outside. And it was very, very cold and the wind was blowing. And, you know, little me, it was almost pushing me over. But I said to Tim, I'm going outside and I'm going to run on the lawn for 45 minutes. And we set the alarm, and I was able to outwind the storm. So there were things that I set challenges for myself. And maybe because that's the kind of person I am, I stretch myself. And it's only when you stretch yourself, you can find out what you can do. So then there were days where I felt I wanted to do something different. So I'd just walk up and down the corridor. I mean, we do have a treadmill, so that's really good. We have a treadmill inside. But a transferable concept for people who don't have a treadmill inside is that they can walk up and down their homes throughout the rooms. We had a little step stool, and I would just do steps on that, up and down. I just rest it on the kitchen mat by the sink, and I would up and down, and count my steps. And, you know, there are things. I even march on the spot. We were in a hotel, and back then I had eaten an ice cream, and I knew I had to do exercises. So for half hour, we turned on the TV in the hotel, and I marched on the spot. And after eating a sugary ice cream, I checked my numbers after the march on the spot, 4.8, you know, Canadian A1C level there. So I find marching on the spot is very effective. But sometimes you just sit and you move your legs and you just do some kind of activity. I have found that to be extremely helpful.
Yeah. Thank God that Tim learned about donuts, not necessarily being his friends. I cook, and although I don't think I've ever made a donut, we know the things we worry about is the flour and the sugar, but the eggs and the butter and the lard and the vanilla and the baking powder, that's probably not so bad. But I tell you, it's nice to know that you guys are paying attention. You're using a monitor to see how things are impacting everything. And I think all of that is so valuable as we move forward. And I think about what you've accomplished, Susan, with your books. I mean, 18 books is what you've authored. We've already shared one of them, which is the Sweet Life Diabetes Journal, right? So that's one. And my wife will be using this because she's really trying to pay attention. But one of the cute ones that I was able to get my hands on was this one right here. The little copper penny. And so I just want to pause for a moment and allow you to, first of all, comment on the little copper penny, which is a kid's book, and just comment a little bit on how you ended up writing 18 books and give maybe an example or two so my audience will know about that.
Well, it started off with, my number one isn't here. I tried to bring them all, but I forgot. In the year 2011, I had this restlessness that I needed a tangent, and I wasn't sure what it would be. So I was doing some research, and they said, okay, if you want to do a particular something, why don't you go into a place where those things exist and see how you feel? Mm-hmm. And the first topic that came to my mind, I went into the particular store and I ran out because it just felt so repulsive. Mm. And then I came home and I said, well, that one didn't work. So what is this? And I started to pray. And now I was a speaker for the past 20-some years, because I've been speaking since I was in my 20s. And the idea came to me that you have a collation of talks. People came out to hear you to speak. People invited you to speak. Mm-hmm. And I took 20 of those and I put it in my first book called Golden Apples and Silver Settings. And I'm sorry, I thought I brought it out, but it's not. So anyway, that was in 2011. And in 2012, I was at home and I decided that I heard the news that the penny was retiring, the Canadian penny, because it was getting too costly to produce for its par value. So I decided, the thought came to my mind, if the penny could speak, what would it say? And I sat at the supper table with my family, my husband and daughter, and I started to make up stories. And I said, I could write about a penny. And then on the Monday morning, when Tim was going to work, he came to the bed and he said, if you write your story, I'll read it when I get home.
Mm-hmm.
And I got up immediately. And my little kitten, Smokey, he was with me, but he's now bigger. Smokey he sat with me. I put a penny in front of me and Smokey sat with me and I brainstormed my ideas of Smokey. He agreed with everything. And so Little Copper Pennies was born, which is short stories that where I interviewed a number of people. And here you can see pictures of the pennies.
Yeah.
Who had actually known the value of the pennies, people who had memories from the 1800s, and the penny had come into existence in 1858. And I interviewed a number of people, and I got stories, real, true stories in this book.
Wow.
And I decided that I was going to approach a few publishers to see if they can bring it out for September, because the penny had been carded to be removed in September of 2012. And I got in touch with the Royal Mint of Canada, because, copyright issues over their images. And then in July, they sent me an email that that the penny was not going to be removed in 2012 anymore, now in 2013. So I had to change up my stories. But I couldn't get a publisher who could publish it that fast.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided I was going to publish it myself.
Cool.
And then a teacher said, well, the younger ones, they cannot read those books. Right. So why don't you do one? And so I did this one.
Nice.
The books are sold so well, the series became a Canadian bestseller, that Borealis Press, you can see the emblem here, they picked up my book. And so it was now traditionally, officially published by a publisher with a name. So, I took my own initiative again, went ahead with the books, and then it was recognized for its worth. So these are, my biggest sellers. My other children's book, and once the writing bug gets to you yes. Just move with it. Smokey, my kitty, who was with me on the whole journey, I made bookmarks, and Smokey was invited to a school with me to explain about the book. Smokey went. Smokey was invited to a ladies group I was invited to speak at. So me and Smokey went about doing things until Smokey didn't like traveling. Mm-hmm. And then I went on to write more books. Alphabet on the Farm, again published by Borealis Press. Oops, this one is in French.
En français.
Yeah.
And I also have it in English, but I think I picked up two of the French copies this morning in my haste. But it is in English and in French, Alphabet on the Farm. That was clearly inspired by Smokey, because when Smokey was small, I was playing with him and I said, well, you have 8 stripes, you have 14 whiskers, 4 legs, 1 tail, 2 ears. I could teach children about you. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, but that's too limiting, because you can only teach him to count up to 15, because he didn't have more than 15. And I thought a little longer, and I said, well, Smokey was born on the farm. I'm going to write a book about the farm. And so those came into being. And I'll just round off with my other books. Alphabet of the First Christmas, a Christian alphabet book, because as Christians, we focus on the birth of Christ. Mm-hmm. And so these totally related to the Bible stories. And for those who do not believe in Christ, we have a generic Christmas A to Z, and whereas that other book had Jesus, this one has about Santa and just different little things, and there's a little activity for children to color their own tree. On this one, I made a Christmas tree with my kitties because we love our kitties. So I made a collaged Christmas tree. And so those are there. Smokey was a little naughty when he was small. He locked himself in Tim's car. So I wrote a story for Chicken Soup for the Soul, and they bought it.
I figured out how to use the power lock.
Oh.
When I
Wow.
wasn't looking.
Oh, I can
And then
imagine.
I did Remarkably Ordinary, 20 Reflections on Living Intentionally Right Where You Are, which is
Okay.
just how I live my life, inspirationally, successfully, and you don't wait and think about how you can be something. Find it in the now.
Mhm.
And a corollary one is 10 and a half sketches, insight on living successfully right where you are. This one has got some Bible verses, but this one doesn't have Bible verses because I try to reach people
Yeah,
on the wider
right.
spectrum.
That's right.
And then I have my friend Aida was dying of cancer. We created an anthology. It's international. It's in Portuguese and French and English. Mary, here I've co-written her memoir, My
Mhm.
Garden of Eden. It's her life story. For Granny Franny, I ghost wrote her memoir in a picture
Mhm.
book format. And for one of my friends, for her birthday, I did a book for her.
For her
And
birthday. Wow.
yes, as a birthday gift. And this one, the ABCs of Compassion, the local school, it's a French immersion school, called St. Henry Junior Elementary School. We did a flip book in
Mhm.
English
Oh.
and French in conjunction with the students and staff and principal and myself. And so the children drew the artwork,
Mhm.
and I selected the words, and then we did the meanings. And then when you flip the book and you start on this side, you get the French version.
Nice.
So it's it's my little publishing company. It's my own authorship. This is my latest that was brought out this year. Oh, and I have Touched by Eternity. And
one thing I can say is that as Susan helps people write their stories, lots of people have an idea for a book. Oh yeah, someday I'd like to write a book. There's a lot to it. And they were so happy to work with Susan because she makes it so easy for them. And they were so happy to have their dream book right in their hands.
Yeah.
It's a really rewarding thing.
Yeah. I just think so many of us have stories to tell. And nowadays, as you have discovered before you got officially published, there's no barriers like there used to be. The biggest barrier is just getting started and having the confidence to do it. So for those who are out there who are on the fence, have a story to tell, please put it on paper. Let's get it told, because people need to discover what you have to share. We now know about Smokey, and I'm curious with this love for our furry little friends. Like, how long have you been close to cats? How long have cats been part of your life?
Well, for me, growing up on my dad's farm, we always had cats around and naming the kittens. And of course, they're very good little carnivores. And to have them around the farm to keep things under control, they earned their keep.
Yeah.
And they keep a good watch on me if I'm underneath a piece of equipment struggling with the bolt to come off, and they hear me making noises. They come and see if I'm okay.
Cool.
And we had them ever since I was growing up in Trinidad. All throughout my childhood, we had kittens and cats.
Yeah, it's just a way of life for you guys. I'm curious, circling back real quick. I know carnivore has snack items, but a lot of the keto-friendly items require artificial sweeteners and things like that. And so when it comes to your bodies, whenever you guys are being more ketovore, let's just go there, are you able to tolerate artificial sweeteners? Are you able to tolerate keto products?
I think that I may be able to tolerate it if I should rephrase. I guess I cannot tolerate it because it had caused pain in my spine. I love it. Right. I love the sweet and I love the keto snacks. But ever since I gave up the sweetness when I was back in Costa Rica and I came back home, I have not had the pain in my spine. The pain that I went and took an x-ray just on December 21st last year. And I have not had the pain. But if I eat something sweet, which I tried it just as an experiment to prove my own healing by removing it, I found that it returned. The inflammation is there. I can feel the pain. I feel itching. My skin can just get bumpy. And if I itch it, it just oozes. And so I hadn't known it was because of the artificial sweetness. I hadn't known it was because of almond products, because almond nuts and almond milk and almond flour were big on my radar last year. So I did feel a twinge having to give it up. But because I know how deadly this could be for me, what that pain is so excruciating and paralyzing, why would I want to put myself out having the sweetness, the oxalates that are contained in there? And so no, I don't do any sweeteners at all and no keto products again.
Yeah. So that was something else I learned on this prior to Susan's experience. I had never heard a messaging saying artificial sweeteners could harm you with the way that the pain she was feeling. Like she went to the doctor and they were doing a lot of tests to try and determine what the cause of her pain was. And this was on top of everything else she was experiencing. It was really hard to watch her, how like, it was withering pain. The little pain pills didn't really seem to do much. And I would never have guessed it could be sweetener related. That thought wouldn't have crossed my mind. It's not. So right now I'm afraid of them because I've seen what Susan went through.
And I think it's another lesson of why it's important to do an experiment. And I know for me personally, I can tolerate stevia and pure monk fruit. I would say pure stevia as well. But a lot of the other things that are out there, not so much. Now, thankfully, I don't feel I have to eat these things to be happy. If I do want to have moments when I enjoy these things, I even the chocolate cake we make from the diet doctor is just dark chocolate, eggs, butter, vanilla flavor, but there's no nut oils and things like that. So even when I do a dessert and I'm not being a carnivore for that dessert, I try to avoid the artificial sweeteners. And then if I do a artificial sweetener, I'll make sure it's one that I historically have tolerated. So again, the experimentation is so important. I think the only other question I'd like to ask you, besides, how you're going to protect your nest, is so many cultures struggle with diabetes. I know South Asians have a higher propensity to have diabetes. So I'm just curious what your thoughts on that, why some cultures will struggle, and what would you say to those cultures who maybe are not aware of what we're talking about today in terms of how the diet can fix a lot of things?
Yeah, when I was doing the research, it came up that Asians and First Nations and Africans and South Asians had a greater disposition and almost a predisposition towards diabetes, which I'm glad is a point you raised, because as a person living in a culture that is dominant by another group, where diabetes is not their propensity, my own was dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
I was treated as if I was just like the other person, and therefore how they reacted is how I would react. But, we have this bell curve,
Mm-hmm.
and some of us, we are way out there, even within our own ethnic type groups. So I believe that this tendency towards diabetes came from years and years and years ago of how our ancestors changed their way to eat. And even within my family, now my mother has diabetes. I look like my mother. Of all the children, I bear the closest resemblance. I am the only one that has diabetes. We grew up eating the same foods. When I immigrated to Canada, I even ate better because I was not eating a lot of the local foods, which were higher in oil content and sugar content and white flour. So I was even eating healthier than my other siblings. And they didn't get diabetes, but I did. And therefore, I subscribe to the viewpoint that there is a genetic factor, there is a genetic component, and not everybody gets that genetic part. Having said that, genetics play a part in helping us recognize where it all starts, but it's not an excuse. From there, we launch and take ownership of what could we do? How can we change this so that going forward, where do we break this pattern in the genetics? If I continue eating that way, which was an unconscious way of eating because I didn't even know about diabetes. My mother got hers in the late 70s, and she's now in her early 80s. So it's only a couple of years ago. But to make sure that my children and grandchildren don't have it, I set the pattern, I set the stage now, the way I eat, and I carry those good habits forward in for them. So I believe that ignorance is it plays a huge factor in why diabetes continue in some cultures. They just don't know. So they just eat what is available too, because there is no knowledge that this has oxalates, that when you eat carbs, it converts into sugar the moment you swallow it. They don't know this because I've been talking to a number of my friends and relatives in Trinidad and explaining this, and they were like, we never heard this before. Mm-hmm. So there is a clear lack of knowledge. And one of the things I would really like to do is, my heart is with my people in Trinidad and Tobago. It's got over 12% of the population is diabetic there. And I would really like to be able to do something for them, with them, to get this kind of teaching and training going on there. So those are the primary reasons why diabetes is rampant. And I think it's very important that when we migrate to other cultures where diabetes is not a dominant thing for them, they want to dismiss it easily as, oh, you just didn't eat well.
Mm-hmm.
Because, someone told me, well, only type 1 diabetes is genetic. You have type 2. So, you can't use that. So they just downplayed it, they just dismissed. They just wanted to make you look as if you're using diabetes as a crutch. Well, if I wanted to use diabetes as a crutch, I would be taking medication today and I would be eating everything in the supermarket. I am the last person that someone should even be hinting at that. Mm-hmm. But when some people just want to be very unkind to you, they do those kinds of things. And when you are a visible minority, it happens. And so I want to be a visible minority with a very relevant message that we can help you of any culture if you get diabetes, because I've walked through it and I know what it's like. And I know that unless someone hasn't had it, you can't really paint someone else with a brush. And it's even worse for the person like me who went through it naturally, because you didn't have medication to buffer you up. Mm-hmm. So you continue feeling very sick. You're not able to do something. You have energy for 6 hours in the day. How could you, be working 10 and 12-hour days if you cannot do that? So there need to be that kind of education for the workplace, for anywhere where people with diabetes are. But it's especially important when you are a minority in a culture.
Yeah. And as an educator, I really appreciate your words, because we have a lot of people to reach. And, I do my education as a doctor, certainly through this platform, and we really want to just keep doing it. We should not be outliers. There should be so many more people who can share their stories of healing and or help others. So I will always appreciate that you guys are doing that. I am curious how you each plan to focus over the next 12 months. Like, what parts of your journey, rather it's the nutrition, the exercise, the stress, the sleep, our thoughts, recovering from trauma, our relationships, avoiding things that harm us like organisms and pollutants, and of course, our emotions and our life experiences, where would the focus be over the next 12 months?
For me, luckily, we're in an area where there's lots of farm fresh meat available, and to have that prep plan ready to go so that you don't come in one night and, oh, I didn't thaw anything out, I didn't have anything ready, now what do I do? To always have that plan that something's ready to go, and you think a day or two ahead about how you're going to have that good meat meal ready. And it's so filling that, back to my friend donuts, that when you eat all that protein, those cravings are so minimized that you just want to keep eating that way, because it just takes a burden off of you. It's not as though you're craving all day long. Oh, I'm depriving myself. This is terrible. I don't know if I can do it. You're just full. You're satisfied with what you ate. You're not worrying about it. So, but to make sure, you just can't, go to the cupboard and grab a cookie like you can for your favorite meat dish. So you have to make sure you've done some thinking ahead.
Yeah. What about you, Susan? Anything you plan to focus on?
Yeah, well, I have lived the last year and a half, or going on 2 years, knowing exactly what my next meal was. And whenever I go out, I used to walk with my almonds, and well, now I can't because of the oxalates. So still walking with food, whether it's a boiled egg or whether it's a beef stick. I want to try the carnivore diet totally, maybe for a year. And because I have many years to live ahead, God willing, if there is the opportunity perhaps to introduce back an apple into my diet, because I like apples, I wouldn't mind doing that. I kind of keep them at home so that if ever my blood sugar goes really low,
Right.
then I can have something sweet rather than a chocolate. So it's like having those, tossing up what it is you want to do, what it is you want to eat. And so I have no intention of going back to the carbs. I have no intention of going back to the sweet diet pops. And we do make Dr. Kiltz's ice cream, which is cream and eggs, and we don't put the sugar, we put some vanilla. So just little things like that. That is not straying very far, remaining high protein. And because of the way the oxalates and the histamines affect me, that would be my primary reason why I may not be going back to some of the other foods or having it as more often, because some of them can be pretty okay for people who can tolerate them.
That's right.
But I can't. So I see myself eating the meat-based lifestyle for a while.
Okay. Well, thank you for wrapping up with, first of all, Dr. Kilt's ice cream. I haven't tried it yet, but I've heard it was good. Secondarily, for almost everybody, the carnivore diet makes sense as an elimination diet. So you start there, and then depending on your body, you can start to add back. So I think every individual do what's best for you. I'll probably be a carnivore more than the next person because my stomach doesn't like the plants. But for those who can tolerate it, have at it. You do your experiment, eliminate, and then you add back, and then keep the things that you tolerate and keep the things away that you don't. So I appreciate that. You shared a ton of books, a ton of resources. Let's share. I know you have a website, so let's share how people can kind of find you and the work you're doing.
Yes, it's my name, susanharris.ca. It is, I'm launching a new website later in the month of May. So by the time the podcast is, perhaps it might be there. But the old website is still there with most information. Cool. And my books are sold through borealispress.com. You can find them on amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Chapters Indigo in Canada. And if people go for books and they aren't stocked in the bookstore, you can simply ask the person there to check it in the catalog and to order it for you. So it's pretty easy.
Yeah, it looks good. And I definitely have checked out the site. Looking forward to the new site. Looking forward to the release of the documentary. I think that's going to be exciting for all of us. And just appreciate you and Tim coming to the podcast. Was very pleased I had a chance to meet you guys. And I'm just looking forward to a life of healing. And so just keep doing what you're doing. And I appreciate you guys, and just thank you so much for coming to the episode.
Thanks, Dr. Hampton.
All right. Well, as I wrap up, I appreciate not only you guys for all the people who have checked out this episode. I think we all have a responsibility to share our stories of healing to those who have our ears. We're not evangelizing, we're just sharing a message of healing. And for those who need to hear this message, I'm just happy that we have podcasts, we have books, we have documentaries, we have each other, we have coaching, and all of these things are going to help people who need to heal. So I just want to live in a world where carnivores are allowed to be carnivores. I want to live in a world where vegans are allowed to be vegans. I want people to have choices, and I want them to understand with those choices what additional information they need to understand. And the best way to understand that is to collect data, as Susan has eloquently described during this episode with Tim. So I want to thank you guys again. If you're checking out this episode and you've enjoyed it, make sure to share it with someone who would benefit from it. Make some comments if you've benefited from carnivore. We didn't talk much about intermittent fasting, but if you benefited from that, or any other lifestyle changes, let the world know that you exist so that they can hear your story as well. So, and I, again, thank you for coming to this episode. And until the next episode, continue to be safe, be well, and continue to protect your nest. You've been listening to Protecting Your Nest with Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com.